The moment you tell a
I need to
narcissist how
tell
you
you how I
feel,
feel.
this happens next. When you finally reveal your feelings, the narcissist may appear surprisingly calm initially today. They might listen carefully, nod slowly, and pretend your vulnerability genuinely matters deeply too. But underneath that calm expression, they may already be calculating their next response carefully. Your honesty gives them information about your emotional needs, fears, and deepest insecurities inside. And unfortunately, that information can become powerful ammunition against you much later on someday. At first, they may mirror your emotions and tell you exactly what comforts you. They might say they understand everything because understanding keeps you emotionally invested much longer. You may suddenly feel relieved, believing they finally understand what you've been experiencing inside. But this relief can disappear quickly when their behavior remains exactly the same afterward. Because narcissistic patterns rarely change simply because someone finally explains their emotional pain clearly. Instead, your emotional confession may teach them precisely where your boundaries remain weakest today. They may discover which words hurt you most and which fears control your reactions. They may also learn exactly how much emotional neglect you will tolerate before leaving. This creates a dangerous situation where your vulnerability becomes another powerful tool for manipulation. Sometimes they respond by becoming defensive and immediately shifting attention toward your supposed flaws. Suddenly, your feelings are no longer the subject. Their feelings become the entire conversation. They might accuse you of being selfish, dramatic, sensitive, demanding, or impossible to satisfy. You came hoping for understanding, but somehow leave questioning whether your feelings were unreasonable. That confusion is not accidental when someone repeatedly avoids accountability through emotional manipulation tactics. Another common reaction is minimizing everything, making your pain seem completely insignificant and unnecessary. They may tell you that everyone has problems and you're simply overreacting again anyway. They might remind you of everything they have done, demanding gratitude instead of accountability. This creates a strange emotional exchange where your pain becomes evidence against you instead. You explain your hurt, and they respond by listing reasons you should feel grateful. Eventually, you begin defending your right to feel hurt instead of discussing the problem. That shift is important because it pulls you away from your actual emotional reality. You stop asking, "Why did this happen?" and start asking, "Was I wrong inside?" That is exactly where emotional manipulation can become incredibly powerful and difficult to recognize. However, some narcissists use a completely different response after hearing your emotional confession clearly. They may suddenly become extremely loving, apologetic, affectionate, attentive, and emotionally available once again. For a moment, everything can feel different, almost like the relationship finally transformed completely. They promise change, make emotional declarations, and remind you how deeply they supposedly care. This sudden warmth can make you question whether you misunderstood them all along completely. But watch what happens after the emotional intensity fades and normal life returns again. If the same behavior returns, the apology was probably emotional management rather than transformation. Real accountability produces consistent behavioral change, not temporary affection following emotional confrontation alone again. Another possibility is that they simply withdraw, becoming cold, silent, distant, or emotionally unavailable. They may punish you emotionally because your honesty challenged their preferred control over everything. Suddenly, you are left wondering whether expressing your feelings caused the entire problem somehow. But expressing your feelings did not create the problem. It revealed what already existed. Healthy partners may disagree with your feelings, but they still respect your emotional experience. They can hear criticism without turning your vulnerability into an attack against themselves personally. They may ask questions, take responsibility, apologize sincerely, and work toward meaningful changes afterward. A narcissistic pattern often looks different because accountability feels deeply threatening to their self-image. Your feelings can therefore become something they must defeat rather than something they understand. And this is why explaining yourself repeatedly often produces less peace, not more understanding. You may keep adding details, hoping the perfect explanation will finally make them understand. But the issue may never have been your explanation, your tone, or your timing. Sometimes the person understands perfectly but simply does not want to accept responsibility willingly. That realization can feel painful, but it can also become incredibly liberating for you. You stop trying to prove your pain and start observing their consistent behavior instead. You stop measuring their promises and begin measuring whether their actions actually change afterward. You stop asking whether they understand and start asking whether they respect what hurts. That shift moves your attention away from their reactions and back towards yourself again. Your feelings are not negotiations requiring another person's permission before becoming legitimate emotional experiences. You deserve relationships where vulnerability creates closeness instead of creating dangerous opportunities for control. So, if you tell a narcissist how you feel, observe what follows very carefully. Do they become curious, accountable, and willing to change their behavior consistently afterward today? Or do they become defensive, dismissive, manipulative, temporarily affectionate, or completely emotionally unavailable instead? Their response reveals much more about the relationship than their beautiful promises ever could. And sometimes, the most powerful answer is not explaining yourself again, but protecting yourself. Because your healing begins when you stop begging someone to understand what they know.